Welcome to another great episode of Stories from the Edge of Life. We have again a very special guest, Aliya Cycon, joining us all the way from Spain. Hello,
Hi
Aliya.
everyone. Hello.
Aliya, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, my name is Aliya Cycon. I'm a musician, a composer to be specific, as well as a songwriter. You see, I have these instruments here. This instrument that I'm pointing to is called the oud, and that's my specialization. I'm an oud player, as well as all the other things I mentioned.
All right. So tell us a little bit about how you found the oud.
Yeah, so the oud, just so you can see it one more time, comes from many different parts of the world, but the part of the world where I discovered it was in the Middle East, in the West Bank, in Israel, Palestine. And I saw this instrument. I had heard it before without realizing that that's the sound I had heard in different recordings of different music. But when I saw it with my eyes, I immediately fell in love with it. And I linked it to the sound I had been hearing. Oh, that's that instrument that sounded so cool. And there's nothing like the sound of the oud for me. So I fell in love with it at first sight when I was 18 years old, traveling with my dad in that part of the world. It was really a life-changing experience.
Wow. So just the sound of an instrument and connecting with it.
Yeah, it's as simple as that.
So now I mentioned you're talking to us from Spain, but that's not where you're from. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and how did you end up in Spain?
Yeah, so I'm American. I'm from Massachusetts and went to Berklee College of Music to study music when I was college age. And then after that, I really wanted to get a master's degree in music. And I found out about Berklee College of Music having a master's program in none other than Valencia, Spain for 1 year. So I said, okay, 1 year of my life in Spain. That's interesting. And when I graduated that program, I went as an oud player. I graduated and I fell in love with it, the country, and decided to stay. So this is where I live now.
All right. Now, so that was after you went to the Middle East.
That's right. So I went to the Middle East for the first time when I was 18, then went to college in Boston, made many more trips to the Middle East during that time. After I graduated college, I went to Tunisia and Jordan and did some official tours there with the U.S. Embassy. And then I went and did my master's when I was 23, 24. And now I've been living here ever since.
Amazing, amazing. I always think a lot of people are always looking for that one thing, right? That could be life changing for them, and then to find it and then to devote yourself to it takes a different level of commitment,
That's true.
right? Now, is it possible for you to describe in words, like when you said you heard the oud, what was it? Is it a sense of elation or a connection? What exactly is it that drew you to this one instrument apart from the many others that are out there?
Well, I had grown up playing the piano, so the piano is still a love for me. When I heard, well, I grew up hearing the oud in different recordings, like I mentioned earlier. My parents were big fans of Lorena McKennitt, who's a really beautiful Canadian world music artist, and her music always had oud in it in the background. And I remember loving that sound. I loved that sound when I was a dancer in high school, and there was some Middle Eastern music workshop dance thing, and I was dancing and hearing it. So every time I heard it, it was like this visceral sensation. It's hard to describe it. And then when I saw it in real life, I was just itching to learn it. But all of the words that you said, like elation, connection, it just was very soulful for me, and it felt like it was my voice, which is strange because it's really not associated with American voices, certainly not female American voices either. So it just was this connection. And because I had that passion, it fueled the commitment that was later required to get to the level that I'm at now with playing it.
So that's a very interesting thing that you just shared with us, is like it's your voice, right? So what do you convey with that voice of yours through an instrument? I'm assuming it's an emotion.
It's not any singular emotion. It's more of a message. I really believe that music has this power to make people feel connected in a deep way. And I feel connected when I'm playing, which is extremely important, as the person playing the music. And so it just, I don't know. I mean, it's not just the oud that does this. I think all music, when it's performed, it enables the listener to just go to a very different place than the mundane world. And so when I play the oud, it just feels like it facilitates that the best for me, if that makes sense.
So what happens when you play the oud? What does it do to you? Do you just space out? Do you just there's that concept of being in the flow, right? Is that where it takes you?
The flow state is a really interesting state for a musician. This is really fascinating. But when you get to a certain level of like legit mastery over an instrument, any instrument, you are then able to bypass the technical and the thinking aspect, the intellectual aspect of playing, and go into that flow state. I don't believe that I have fully mastered the instrument enough to enter that kind of a flow state, which is, if you ever see extreme masters like Ravi Shankar or Anushka Shankar for that matter, in Indian music, or like Pat Metheny, the famous jazz guitarist, many jazz musicians, they're such masters over their instrument, which is a lifelong pursuit, that when they play, it's like speaking. When I play the oud, I do experience, anyone playing any instrument at any level can experience a sense of like flow and creativity. So I do experience that, but it's still a wonderful mix of like intellectual stimulation, because I'm playing this very challenging instrument, like musical stimulation, because I'm hearing what I'm liking what I'm hearing and I'm getting excited, and then emotional stimulation for just being part of the music. So for me, that flow state is like a whole nother level that I do believe I will reach as I keep working hard at mastering the instrument.
Now, that is very humble of you. While you might feel you don't attain the flow state to the extent that you might want to someday, when I've seen your videos, I think you're completely in a state of flow.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Yeah.
But it's one's own perception, right? So perhaps you are a perfectionist, where you want to attain that level of perfection where you just melt with your instrument. Now, the interesting thing, and pardon my ignorance, you said it's a difficult instrument or challenging instrument. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Because for a novice like me, how is it any different from a guitar?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason it's a challenging instrument is the same reason that would make it different than a guitar. Not that a guitar is not a challenging instrument in itself, but what separates an oud from a guitar, one of the main characteristics, is that the neck of the instrument does not have frets. So frets are those lines on the neck of a guitar or on a ukulele or something that basically tell your finger where to press, and it separates the different notes from each other. When there's no fret, suddenly it's a free-for-all. You could play any note in any place. They're not separated by lines, which enables the oud to play microtones, which are notes that don't exist in the Western scale, but in Eastern Occidental music, they exist. Violins have this characteristic, cellos have this characteristic. There's a neck involved in playing, but there's no frets. So your muscle memory is responsible for making sure your left hand is pressing the right notes in tune. So that's a huge challenge when you're brand new to an instrument, because it's it's these very minute differences that make all the difference in the tonality and in the intonation of the music. So that's one of the main difficulties. And the second difficulty is in the right hand, because you're playing with a long pick. I don't have it, but you have a long skinny pick, and you hold it in your hand and you move your wrist very quickly to play these things. It's not like a guitar with the triangle shaped pick where you're strumming chords, which is really cool. But with the oud, you're not actually playing chord notes, you're playing melody notes. And so for every single note, that's a movement of the wrist, imagine. All of that is in the wrist, and it's very rhythmic. So you're also training your right hand to your right wrist, really, to make very minute movements. So everything about the oud is minutia. That's why it's challenging.
Thanks for letting me know. And it sounds like you really have to know your instrument well to figure out where to hit the right note.
Yes, and that's why we practice, because every single day you get to know the instrument better, and you've really only mastered some aspect of a scale or of a rhythm or of a playing pattern when it feels second nature, when it feels easy. So it takes hours and days and consistency to get to the place where you're at ease.
So if you're used to playing your own oud, and if I were to hand you a different one, will it take you some time to get used to playing it?
It depends. A lot of ouds are made with really the same measurements. Okay. That being said, every oud is slightly different, but it's not impossible. It's certainly not. It's probably not that different than when you play a different piano in any different space that you enter. Yeah.
Got it. So how long have you been playing this instrument now?
10 years.
10 years. And when you talk about your practice, how many hours during a day does it take?
Yeah, that really depends on the person. I've never been one of those people who can practice for like 5 hours in a day, although many people would give you that answer: 5 hours, 6 hours, 4 hours. For me, 2 hours maximum is more than enough if it's very focused, and I'm very, very focused in my practicing time. So 2 hours is more than enough. After that, I can't anymore.
Got it. Now, you do have a personal connection with music. You did mention that you had an experience with, when I told you the kind of medicine I practice, and which is hospice and palliative medicine. You've had a personal experience, and music played a very important role, through that experience of yours. Would you be comfortable sharing some insights of that experience with our audience?
I would love to share about that, because it was a beautiful experience of my life, and I'm sure that people that are watching this might be able to relate to some aspect of it. So that would be amazing. So basically, my grandfather spent his final years living in my parents' home, and at that time, that was between my college graduation and my going to Spain. There was this 1 year in between there where I moved back and lived with my parents, and it happened to coincide with the final year of my grandfather's life. Very, very, very close to our family, a survivor of World War II. He was Polish and escaped, so he had a very rich life story, and was a very spiritual man as well. And he loved music. And as soon as I picked up the oud, even though he had no cultural connection to it, he's Polish, he loved it right away. And he was always interested in hearing me play, including hearing me practice. So during that year that we were all living in that one house, I had been playing oud for about 5 years at that point. So I was at a good level, and I was practicing every day. And that was like the highlight of his day, was to come out of his room, and, he had no problem with the metronome clicking and me just playing very boring exercises. He loved it. And he would lean back and close his eyes and sometimes fall asleep. or just go into a very relaxed state, and all of the burdens and all of the difficulties of being at such an old age just really seemed to melt away. And sometimes he would even share with me like kind of these like spiritual experiences he would have when he heard the oud. So it was really a sweet connection between us. And then he slowly started dying, just very naturally. And it became apparent that he was in his last few weeks of life. So we were really fortunate to have hospice visitors coming to our home. We never, he was never at a point where he needed to be in some kind of a residence or facility. So we had hospice visitors coming to our home. And so the whole hospice experience took place in our home. And I would just go in his room and play oud for him. And so, you know, the last week of his life, he was mostly not fully conscious. But it was still this sweet way to just connect to his soul. And yeah, it was a really powerful, powerful season of life. And at that time, my sister also, she's not a professional musician. She's not even really a musician at all, but she's really interested in the harmonium instrument, which is used in all different kinds of circumstances. And she really loves it for chanting and things like that. So she would bring the harmonium in the room, and sometimes we would play together. And for him, sometimes it was her, sometimes it was me. So he was really surrounded by music and by the oud at the end of his life. And actually, just to continue on that theme, one of my mom's best friends is a professional, kind of like a hospice harp player. So her profession is to go to the dying and play harp for them. Sometimes people actually pass on into the next life with the harp playing. So we actually had her come and play for my grandfather as well. He lived through it, but passed away a week later. But it was so powerful, not just for the person who's dying, but for the family and the people who love that person as well. So I was just so touched, and it just made so much sense when I got in touch with you guys, when you guys got in touch with me, because it's continuing that theme. So that's the story.
Thank you for sharing that. And did you notice any change in him when you would play the music? You mentioned there was a time when he was not as responsive, but when you played music along with your sister or just by yourself, did you notice any difference in his state or overall well-being?
Yeah, he always seemed so much more peaceful, you know, so much more peaceful. Maybe like a little smile would crack on his lips, or he just seemed, you know, relaxed. But there were times that he was like fully not conscious when I played. So in those times, not as much, but it always changed the atmosphere as well. It wasn't just in him, but it changed the whole atmosphere of the whole family's experience of him passing away, of him being in that final phase of life. So yeah, it really, there were a lot of noticeable changes because of it.
And yeah, so in those moments and during that phase, you mentioned you actually ended up composing a particular piece of music, right?
Yeah, it was very
And
spontaneous.
yeah, and thank you. You have contributed that piece of music to us for us to share with our audience. Um, Anything you want to add about that particular piece that you composed?
Mm. Yeah, it's even funny to use the verb composed about that piece, because when I think of composing, I think of myself sitting down here in this very chair and writing out the notes of things. And in this case, I was just sort of improvising, and out of that improvisation came this refrain and the words, "I am going home, and if you never try, you never know. So I am going home." And I guess it's just something that came out of me. And whenever that type of composition emerges, I know that it has a deeper source and a deeper meaning. So I hope that when people will hear it, they will really connect to that deeper message, you know,
Right.
as they
So
understand.
Thank you. Thank you. Now you've composed, I'm sure you've composed a lot of different pieces of music. What significance does that particular one have for you? Of course, it was the timing, right? It was while your grandfather was on hospice. But when you play nowadays, does it take you back to that time, or that emotional state that you were going through?
It really does. We all know that music can just transport you to a certain moment of time, and that's what that piece really does for me. Which is why I wanted to contribute it to this project. I've never officially recorded it. I've never released it. It's always stayed sort of in my heart, and so what better opportunity to share it than now, because of the way that it evokes that time in life. And the message going home, it's like for everyone that experience of death is different, and I'm no expert by no means, but it is a part of life. Every single person will die and will pass on, and because it's such a part of life, maybe it would bring us more hope to behold that time as something of a homecoming, like that there's something better, or that there's something fulfilled in that person passing away, because it's something we're all going to have happen at some point. It's part of our lives. It's part of the story of every single person's life. And so I guess the song talks about, that refrain, it's going home. And if you never try, you never know. If you never embrace that aspect of life, then you might not know that it's something beautiful. Obviously I say that with a lot of sensitivity, because when you're losing a loved one, or if you yourself are facing that, it's very difficult to find something positive about it, I know. But if it can offer something of a hope to somebody who's hearing this, then that will have been sort of the manifestation of that song, if that makes sense.
We feel honored that you're sharing that composition with us, and I can tell you without doubt that it's going to help a lot of patients, their family members, lay people like myself. So thank you very much for doing that. So before we wind up, can you tell us a little bit more about how folks can access your works, and also what's going on with your career? You keep yourself pretty busy. So can you tell us as to what we can expect, coming from your desk in the future, or from your studio? Sorry, to
No, I
to
like
speak
that
in
you call it
music.
like that. I love that, because this desk is where it all happens, actually. So I love it. There's a microphone here that you can't see. It's all here. So yes, from the desk. I'm working on a new album. I've already recorded 2 albums plus an EP, which is like a mini short album, and then I've released some singles. But this album I'm really excited about. It's in the very beginning phases, but I can exclusively share with you guys that it's going to be, the concept of the whole album is like a pilgrimage. This idea that we're pilgrims here, that we're kind of all searching for our homes, and even in our own lands, in our own cultures, there's always that longing for like a true home. And so that's kind of what the album is about. And it's fitting because I've always been this restless traveler. I've been not all over the world, but I've been to all these different places and live in a different country than my own. And there's so many musical influences that go into my music. So rather than stamping it as Middle Eastern music or as world fusion music or whatever people would stamp it as, it's like a pilgrimage through different influences in different parts of the world, different languages, with the idea that we're all kind of pilgrims and we're all kind of not quite home where we are. We're all kind of looking for some kind of like unified place. So that's the concept of the album. If people want to hear my music, I have a YouTube channel and an Instagram, and I have all my music released on Spotify and Apple Music and wherever people can hear music. People can still purchase my physical albums as well. So I'm going to assume that we could put all of that in the link, all the links in the caption of this video. So that would be great.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend accessing our audience to access your works. And you've got some really great stuff out there, along with pretty much all your works. There is that one particular song that I really like a lot. It's called "You Are Loved," and I was just thinking about when I talk to patients, and they talk about this sense of isolation, right, and feeling very alone. And I think that's the voice they probably want to hear. That there is somebody to care for you, and we care for patients. In medicine, when we treat patients either in the hospitals or in the field of hospice, often we have patients at home. I mean, while they're surrounded by a lot of people, um, because they're going through a unique experience that nobody else is, and the common theme I get to hear is I feel really isolated. So I think your song will be a great friend to them.
That's exactly why I wrote it. In fact, that song, there's a verse in the song that says, I awoke at 4 a.m. These three words were in my head. Maybe you're the one I'm writing for. You are loved. And that's really what happened. I literally in my dream heard those words, you are loved, with the melody that you'll hear in the song. And I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, tiptoed out of the bedroom, grabbed my oud and quietly recorded the idea down so that I wouldn't forget. And I went back to sleep. You are loved.
Wow. Thank you. That's such a high note to end our discussion. And can't thank you enough for being who you are and sharing your journey with us. And we look forward to keeping in touch with you, and hopefully, hearing a lot more of your music on our channel.
Yeah, I feel really lucky to be in touch with you guys, and I love the idea that there's somebody actually watching this at some point, and for whoever that is, you are loved and you are not alone. And I really hope that my music and all the other musicians' music on this channel will bless you and leave you feeling hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.